host, Sharon Hill, No Critics, Just Politics. We're back with another discussion on political philosophy. Now, today we're going to be discussing Hobbes and a few other philosophers. Hobbes, a 17th century English philosopher, he has spent his life as a tutor, companion to great noblemen. He was also a writer of genius with a great power of phrase than any other English political philosopher. He was not, as he is sometimes misrepresented, as a prophet of bourgeoisie or individualism, advocating free competition and the capitalist free market. On the contrary, he was writing in a pre-industrial, if increasingly commercial society, and did not much admire wealth as such, but rather honors. He was socially conservative and eager to give a new philosophical sanction to hierarchical, if business-like commonwealth in which family authority was the most important. Philosophically, Hobbes was influenced by nominalist scholastic philosophy, which has discarded Thomism metaphysics and accepted strict limitations on the powers of the mind. He therefore based his conclusion on the rudimentary mathematical physics and psychology of his day and aimed at practical objectives, order, and stability. He believed that fundamental physical law of life was motion and that the predominant human impulses was fear, and among those above the poverty level, pride and vanity. Men, Hobbes argued, are strictly conditioned and limited by these laws, and he tried to create a science of politics that would reflect them, the skill of making and maintaining commonwealth, and therefore consisted in certain rules, as doth arithmetic and geometry, on practice only, which rules neither poor men have leisure nor men that have had the leisure have had the curiosity or the method to find out. Hobbes ignores the classical and Thomist concepts of transcendent law of nature, a self-reflecting divine law, and of great chain of being, whereby the universe is held harmoniously together, following the practical method of investigation advocated by French philosopher René Descartes. Hobbes states plainly that power creates law, not law power, for law is law only if it can be enforced, and the price of security is one supreme sovereign public power. For without it, such is the competitive nature of humanity, that once more than subsistence has been achieved, people are actuated by vanity and ambition, and there is war of all against all. The true law of nature is self-preservation, he argues, which can be achieved only if citizens make a compact among themselves to transfer their individual power to ruler who alone can preserve them in security. Now, such a commonwealth has no intrinsic, supernatural, or moral sanction. It derives its original authority from the people and can command loyalty only so long as it succeeds in keeping the peace. He thus uses both the old concepts of natural law and contract, often invoked to justify resistance to authority, as a sanction for it. Hobbes, like Machiavelli, starts from an assumption of basic human folly, competitiveness, and depravity, and contradicts Aristotle's assumption that man is by nature a political animal. On the contrary, he is naturally antisocial, and even when men meet for business and profit, only a certain market fellowship is endangered. All society is only for gain or glory, and the only true equality between men is their power to kill each other. Hobbes sees and desires no other equality. Indeed, he is specifically discouraged men of low degree from a saucy behavior towards their betters. The Leviathan horrified most of its contemporaries. Hobbes was accused of atheism and of maligning with the human nature. But if his remedies were tactically impractical in political philosophy, he had gone very deep by providing the sovereign nation state with a pragmatic justification and directing it to utilitarian ends. We now move into Spinoza. Now, Spinoza was a 17th century Dutch Jewish philosopher. Benedict de Spinoza also tried to make a scientific political theory, but it was more humane and more modern. Hobbes assumes a pre-industrial and economically conservative society, but Spinoza assumes a more urban setting. Like Hobbes, he's a Cartesianist, aiming at scientific basis for political philosophy. But whereas Hobbes was dogmatic and authoritative, Spinoza desired toleration and intellectual liberty, by which alone human life achieves the highest quality. Spinoza is reacting against the ideology wars of religion and skeptical of both metaphysics and religious dogma. Was a scientific humanist who justified political power solely by its usefulness. If state power breaks down and can no longer protect him, or if it turns against him, frustrates or runs his life, then any individual is justified in resisting it. Since it no longer fulfills its purpose, it has no intrinsic, divine, or metaphysic authority. In the Tractatus Theological Politics and the Tractatus Politics, Spinoza developed his theme. He intends, he writes, not to laugh at men or weep over them or hate them, but to understand them. In contrast to St. Augustine, he glorifies life, holds that government should not try to change men from rational beings into beasts or puppets, but enable them to develop their minds and bodies in security and to employ their reason unshackled. The more life is enjoyed, he declares, the more the individual participates in divine nature. God is intimate in the entire process of nature, in which all creatures follow the laws of their own being to the limit of their powers. All are bound by their own consciousness, and man creates his own values. It seems that for Spinoza's thought, good government approximated to that of the free burgesses of Amsterdam, a city in which religious toleration and relatively political liberty had been realized. He is thus a pioneer of scientific humanist view of government and of the neutrality of the state of matters in his belief. Richard Hooker, another philosopher who adapted Thomism out of the breakup of the medieval social order, there emerged the humanist but skeptical outlook of Machiavelli, and then the scientific humanist principles of Descartes, Hobbes, and Spinoza, from which the utilitarian and pragmatic outlook of modern time derives. Another influential and politically important strain of political philosophy emerged from the Reformation and the Counter-Reformation of the 16th and 17th centuries. During this period, Protestant and Catholic dogmatists denounced each other and even attacked the authority of the princesses from interest or conviction, supported from one side or the other. Political assassination became endemic, for both Protestants and Catholic divines declared that it was legitimate to kill a heretic ruler. Appeal was made to rival religious authority as well as to conscience. In the resulting Wiltshire, Hobbes and Spinoza advocated a sovereign state as the remedy, but other political philosophers salvaged the old Thomist concept of a divine cosmic order and of natural and human laws sanctioning the state. They also put forth the classical and medieval idea of the derivation of public power from the commonwealth as a whole and the responsibility of prince to law. When Hobbes wrote that might makes right, he outraged such critics who continued to assert that public power was responsible to God and the laws, that it was right to resist a tyrant who declared that laws were in his own beast. This political theory was most influentially developed in England, where it inspired the constitutionalism that would also predominate in the United States. Now, Richard Hooker, an angelical divine who wrote of the laws of the ecclesiastical polity, reconciled Thomist doctrines of transcendent and natural law, binding on all human beings with the authority of the Elizabethan Church of England, which he defended against the Puritan appeal to conscience. Society, he argued, is itself the fulfillment of the natural law, of which human and positive law are reflections adapted to society. Public power is not something personal, for it derives from the community under the law. Thus, the lawful power of making laws to command whole politic societies of men belongs so properly unto the same entire society that for any prince to exercise the same of himself is no better than mere tyranny. Such power can derive either directly from God or else from people. The prince is responsible to God and the community. He is not like Hobbes' ruler, a law unto itself. Law makes the king, not the king law. Hooker indeed insisted that the prince was a delegated power from the Parliament of England, together with the conservation of clergy and annexed thereto, whereupon the very answers of all government doth depend. This is the power of the crown and Parliament in a balanced constitution. Hence an ideal of harmonious government by consent. The Thomas medieval universal harmony has been adopted to the nation state. Now Locke, it was John Locke, politically the most influential English philosopher, who further developed the doctrine, his two treatises of government that were written to justify the glorious revolution of 1688 to 1889. In his letter concerning toleration, 1889, was written with a plain and easy urbanity. In contrast to the Baroque eloquence of Hobbes, Locke was a scholar, physician, and man of affairs, well experienced in politics and business. As a philosopher, he accepted strict limitations on the faculties of the mind. His political philosophy is moderate and sensible, aimed at a balance of power between the executive, the judiciary, and the legislature, though with a bias towards the last. The separation of church and state, checks and balances. His first treatise was devoted to confuting the royalist doctrine of the divine right of kings by descent from Adam, an argument then taken very seriously and reflecting the ideal government as an aspect of the divine ordained great chain of being. If this order was broken, chaos would ensue. The argument was part of the contemporary conflict of the ancients and the moderns. Locke tried to provide an answer by defining a limited purpose for political power, whose purpose he considered to be right making laws with penalties of death, and consequently all less penalties, for the regulating and preserving of the property, and of employing the force of the community in the execution of such laws, and in the defense of commonwealth from foreign injury. All of this only for the public good. The authority of the government derives from a contract between the rulers and the people, and the contract binds both parties. It is thus a limited power proceeding according to established laws and directed to no other end but the peace and safety and good of the people.